This Sacramento Kings season was filled with ups and downs, highs and lows, and no player rode the roller coaster quite like Kevin Huerter. As we continue our Kings exit interview series here, Kevin spoke about his frustrating year and also the timetable for his injury return. You'll hear that, plus hear from Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all season long. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I've got a little bit of a competitive side, and that competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now for free on the App Store or Google Play. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. This is the second episode of this exit interview series. So just to kind of set the scene for you in case you missed the first episode yesterday, at the end of every season, the Kings hold exit interviews or like an end-of-season press conference where they bring out a vast majority of their roster. On yesterday's show, you heard from De'Aaron Fox, you heard from Malik Monk, and you heard from Domantas Sabonis. Malik Monk and his future was really the main topic of conversation during yesterday's exit interviews. Well, today you're going to hear from Kevin Huerter, Harrison Barnes, and Keegan Murray on a future episode later on this week, probably on Thursday. You are going to hear from Sasha Vezenkov, Keon Ellis, and Davion Mitchell, I think are the other three that you're going to hear from. In between that, though, tomorrow we have our exit interviews that we are conducting with Kings general manager Monte McNair and head coach Mike Brown. And both of those guys, I'm sure, are going to have a lot to say about the disappointments this season and the work that needs to be done this offseason. So over the course of this week, you're going to be hearing from basically the entire team, the front office, the head coach, all about this year, putting a bow on this year and turning our attention to the future. So I highly encourage you to go and check out yesterday's podcast if you want to hear from Monk, Fox, and Sabonis. But today we're starting with Kevin Huerter. And Kevin went through quite the roller coaster this year. On a future episode of Locked On Kings, probably early next week, I'm going to be doing an episode where we are going to list out Monte McNair's keep list from this season, or the guys that I think proved this season that they belong on a Kings roster that Sacramento can feel confident can actually compete for a future NBA championship. And then there's the other list of guys that probably aren't going to make the cut or probably need to be replaced. Based off of this season, I think Kevin Huerter, unfortunately, is going to fall on the needs to be replaced spot. That being said, he's still under contract. It is a team-friendly contract, so Kevin may not be going anywhere. And he is dealing with that shoulder injury that he suffered in the latter parts of last season. He spoke openly during his post-season press conference or end-of-season press conference just about how frustrating this year was for him. He kept a good mindset. He's still very optimistic about the future. A lot of good stuff here from Kevin at the end of the year.
Timetable-wise, when do you feel like you're going to be able to get out of that brace and start being able to take shots again and just trying to get back into basketball activities?
Yeah, I should still got about 4 more weeks in the sling. They said 12 weeks out from surgery was start shooting, doing on-court stuff. I'm already kind of ahead of schedule a little bit. So, we're hoping August is contact. Should really be on pace for training camp in September. So, a couple more weeks in this, though.
Good to hear. And then this summer, you and Malik have grown close last summer, playing a lot of golf, especially on the court as well. Just, are you in his ear saying, hey, we'd love to have you back here and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, we all are. I think there's a lot of talk about him today. Everybody knows the situation. We love him around here. He's great energy for this organization. He's a big voice in the locker room. He's really everybody's best friend on the team. But it's a business. We all know that. It's a business, and we know the situation here. And I think a lot of that will dictate, how other teams see him. I think everybody knows how this team and this organization sees him. And so everybody hopes he's back. We hope it works out. But it's a business, and you got to respect him for wanting to go get paid, obviously.
Kevin, how tough was this season for you, not only just on the court, then the injury, and what did you learn about yourself this year?
Yeah, I mean, frustrating season. Frustrating is definitely the word. Even before the injury, just a lot of ups and downs, a lot more downs this year than I think in previous years, and continuously trying to be positive and letting work kind of and staying in the gym just kind of drive my mental state, and just staying in the game, staying positive, and you learn a lot every year. This is year 6 for me, which is kind of crazy. Experienced a lot in this league already, and just continue to try to get better as a player and make it through certain situations. And I think I learned a lot personally this year and how to get through certain things, and hopefully it obviously benefits me the rest of my career.
Kevin, from the outside perspective, it kind of looked like you and both the offense-defense relationship kind of were on the same page, to where the more that was asked on the defensive end, sometimes the offense would take a dip, and that could be said about the entire team. Just from your perspective on that, the balance of working hard on one area and it potentially taking away from another, do you see aspects of that, or do you believe you don't have to sacrifice one for the other?
Yeah, I don't think you should have to sacrifice one for the other. I think best players in this league and best teams can do both, and so I think our team is capable of doing both. I think me as a player, I'm definitely capable of doing both. I don't think you should have to sacrifice one.
Kevin, Mike played a lot of 3-guard lineups at the end of the season. I was wondering, would you be comfortable in that, like moving to a small forward role, if you were asked with that moving forward?
Yeah, I'm open to anything, to be honest. Played in a lot of those types of lineups in my time in Atlanta, even in playoff series, and guarding bigger defenders and in some ways guarding smaller guys. I think that's always been a strength of my game, kind of being able to fit into different roles, and whatever's asked for me on this team, I'm for the most part willing to do.
On paper, Kevin, this team is loaded with three-point shooting talent, and Mike has really leaned into that, giving you guys the green light. As a whole, though, it's been a pretty inconsistent three-point shooting year. You're one of the best three-point shooters on the team. I guess, what do you attribute that to, this team kind of dipping from three and relying so much on that shot? Yeah,
I think it's how we're getting those threes. Shot quality, I think, is big in that. I go how we're getting them. We talked about spray threes a lot all year. DHOs in general, our offense has a lot of those. It's a tough shot. Even if a lot of your threes are getting sprinting off a DHO full speed, rising up and shooting, that's a tough shot to take. And me and Keegan take a lot of those, and Malik has taken a lot of those. And the high percentage looks you can give, we're playing inside out, hitting Domas in the middle of the floor and letting him make plays, I think is when we're at our best. And the threes that you don't love are probably early shot clock, depending on when that comes in. The ones that are off the dribble, times where it just kind of feels like maybe we're settling, and everybody has been a culprit of doing that. So it is a strength, but three-point shooting is a strength of a lot of teams in the NBA. It's just kind of where the game has gone. You look at Dallas Mavericks and how they play. I think, for me, that's the first one that comes out the top of my head. It feels like they shoot 73s a game. It's obviously not 70, but the way that they get those threes or skip passes and Luka making plays and finding guys, and it's not how our offense runs, but that's just the NBA, and it's how are you going to get those looks?
Mike always talks about the potential benefit of dealing with adversity throughout the course of the season. You're definitely had it in and out starting lineup, some up and down shooting, and then the injury. Just what was it like for you to deal with that this season, and what do you feel like you learned?
Yeah, I'll just go back to the word frustrating. A lot of stuff happened behind the scenes, conversations, trying to understand, the rhyme, the reason for what we're doing and what the coaches are thinking, what the players are thinking, just trying to get on the same page. And I think that was something that we just kind of went through really cycles over the whole course of the year. It kind of felt like I was just going in cycles. I play well for a couple weeks, and then I lose it for a week or two, and then come back and I play well, and it's not how I want to play. It's not how you guys want to watch us play. So just continuing to try to find consistency with how I can fit in with this group, this offense, the other players that we have on our team, with the coaching staff, trying to figure out exactly what they're looking for me to do on a nightly basis, and trying to limit those downs as much as you can.
Kevin, I'm actually, those frustrations at adversity that you mentioned, I'm kind of curious about the human dynamic. You experience that, and then, you have the injury, and then the team as a whole doesn't punch through to the playoffs like you did last year. I'm wondering, is that kind of like is that a burden at all on you as you head into the offseason thinking about those what ifs?
Yeah, I mean, there's always what ifs going into any offseason. Even on times going into my second year where I played a lot as a rookie, like there's always a what if you're going to be on the team next year. That happens every single year, unless you're maybe De'Aaron Fox or Domas on this year's team, or Keegan, whoever would be the absolute safest person. So that's something that you deal with every year. I just think I've always had a good support system. Our coaching staff here did a good job of trying to reach out and be there for me when I had questions or was trying to understand different things. And my family back at home, the people I trained with in the summer, had a lot of people reaching out over the course of the year. And then the injury definitely felt like the icing on top. But to be honest, I kind of go back, like I probably had my best career as a pro last year. And so then this was probably my worst year as a pro this year. And so I think in a lot of ways they balance out. And if you look at it lightweight, hey, next year we should be back. I'm optimistic about getting through this summer, through this injury. I'll be in the weight room a lot, which I think is always fun going into an off season. And next year I think I'm looking at it really positively and think that you'll all be back.
Now that you've heard Kevin, I want to hear from you. What do you think about Kevin's future? Do you think his time here in Sacramento is done or should be done? Do you think Kevin can get back to that level to actually, again, it's not just about the Kings improving upon this season, next season. It's not just about the Kings getting back to the playoffs. They're trying to open up a championship window. It's obviously not going to happen as early as next year, or if it does, some serious changes are going to be made or have to be made this offseason. But do you think that Kevin Huerter could be a part of a eventual championship roster in Sacramento? If you're answering yes, then you hold on to him. If the answer is no, you probably look to try and improve your roster and maybe use him and his good contract in order to get that done. But where do you fall in regards to Kevin Huerter? Let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Or, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Before we hear from Harrison Barnes, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more player stats and watch the winnings roll in. I had a very successful season with PrizePicks this year, made over $700 on PrizePicks while just following along with the Kings like I normally do, and a lot of us Kings media members, Kings fans, a lot of us playing and talking PrizePicks before every single game. Look, PrizePicks has something for every sports fan, from basketball to hockey to even League of Legends and esports. You can pick LeBron, Caitlin Clark, Connor McDavid, Jude Bellingham. There's so many names that you can pick, so many ways that you can play on PrizePicks. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this basketball season too. When you win, you get your money quickly and easily. So go to prizepicks.com, download the app today, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNBA, a first deposit match up to $100. You deposit $100, you get $100 instantly. No questions asked. That's PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Harrison Barnes is another one of those guys that had a bit of an up and down season, but his felt very different from Kevin Huerter's. Kevin was asked to do more and just went into slumps. The biggest ups and downs of Barnes' season was times where he would disappear versus times where he would suddenly play very, very well. And I don't think it had to do with him being asked more. In fact, I think it more had to do with his role and kind of being held out of the spotlight or having to take a back seat for other players to get their push and get their opportunity. That's something that the Kings kind of figured out and corrected towards the second half of the season, where Barnes ended up being a little more effective. That being said, a lot of you out there do believe that Harrison Barnes is another one of those guys that the Sacramento Kings should be considering replacing or upgrading this offseason. Of course, we have months to see if the Kings eventually make that decision, but here's Harrison Barnes and his comments in his end-of-season press conference.
This season ended in a different way than last year, of course. Just where are you guys at as a group, and do you feel like this was a successful season, or did it leave you wanting something more?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's still trying to process the abruptness of the ending of the season, but I think when you look at all the goals that we had coming into the season, I think the floor of that was making the playoffs. So to miss that, it's a little bit of a disappointing feeling, but at the same time, you get back to the drawing board, figure out ways to get better.
How valuable do you think it was for this group to go through a year of having more expectations compared to last year and also getting a little bit of that postseason experience with the play-in?
It's good, but I think at the same time, it gives you a lot of motivation to not be in the play-in situation coming to next year, right? You play all these games, you work to get into a certain position, and I think like I said after the game, it's easy to look at these last few games or the last game and try to say, this is a microcosm of the season, but I think there was a lot of opportunities that we had early on in the season to not be in that position.
HB, heading into the offseason, what do you think needs to be added to this roster to put it over the hump, to make it a playoff team every single year? Or do you believe the roster that you guys currently have is good enough to do what you guys want to do?
I mean, it's always a tough question when you get eliminated, in the play-in, right? Because if you get to the playoffs and, whatever may happen happens, maybe we're reevaluating things differently. I think, first and foremost, I think we have to look at the season based off when we were healthy, the type of team we were. And then from there, I mean, that's, really just, a money question. But, selfishly as a player, I feel like we had enough talent to compete with anybody in this league when we were healthy. And I feel like we showed that at times.
Harrison, back-to-back 82-game seasons for you for the first time in your career. What's been the key to just your consistency, especially at this point in your career?
Man, just a team of people, honestly. A team of people that keep me right physically, mentally. Obviously, my family for the, the sacrifice of all the things that go into, playing every single night. There's definitely a lot of nights, you're not sure if you have it or not sure if you're going to be able to play, but, just by the grace of God to be able to play 82 is it's a great feeling.
HB, going back to that last question, do you think do you take this season at face value, given the results, the record, a little bit of a step back in terms of where you were in the West, or is it hard to really assess that given some of the circumstances that you guys dealt with?
I mean, I think, like I said, when I look back at our season, I don't necessarily think what we're lacking or what didn't we do. I think more so about the games that we played that, we lost to under 500 teams in a way that wasn't consistent with how we wanted to approach things. And I think when I look at that and I look at, where things could have been, I say, okay, that changes our whole outcome. That changes the whole vibe of the, building right now, the whole vibe of, this interview, all of that type of stuff, right? So because of that and the way we lost in the play-in, I'm not going to overreact and say, like, we need to blow this thing up. I was talking to somebody after the game, I don't remember who, and I was like, this is, back-to-back years that we've had consistency in terms of a front office and a coaching staff standpoint. You know what I mean? There's different levels to what disappointment has looked like in this franchise, at least in my tenure of being here. So I think for us, it's taking stock of that and just saying, look, how do you improve the roster going forward, knowing that we're not starting at, a top 5 lottery pick team.
When you look back at some of those losses, like to the Pistons, the Hornets, Blazers, Wizards, is it when you look back, is it like how you guys approach things as a team? Why do you think those type of matchups were difficult for you guys this year?
I think it's just finding consistency. I mean, I think when you look at some of these games that we've lost and you look at where the top 5, top 6 teams in the West, I mean, those teams, they took care of business on the nights that they were supposed to. And I feel like a lot of times we won games, maybe we weren't, I mean, in light of today's circumstances, I don't want to say favored to win, but against teams that were up there in the standings. And there were games where, we should have won that we just didn't have the right mental approach. And it comes back to, there's not always going to be, there's going to be a tomorrow, there's going to be another game. We get to the last 2 weeks of the season, right, and everyone's, hyper-focused, the Dallas series, the New Orleans, Phoenix back-to-back, things like that. Looking at the standings, the last couple games, those games matter. And, the coaches have talked about it. We talked about it as players early on in the season, right? But I think to actually go through that, last year when we did it, at the number 3 seed, it's a little bit different. But this year, where those games actually mattered, it came back to bite us.
And then one more, Malik's going to be a free agent, and obviously he's had a great year. What has he meant to you guys, and have you had conversations with him? Will you try to convince him to maybe even take a pay cut in some ways to stay here?
I think you said it right. I mean, he had a great year, Sixth Man of the Year, without question. So I think it's a credit to him and what he's been able to accomplish this year, but what he's given our team. And when he went down, obviously that was tough to replace. But I think he knows that he's got a home here. We all want him back. We understand the business of things. We understand the nature of how that works. And ultimately, he'll make whatever decision is best for him. And the economics are what they are. But in terms of wanting him to come back or him knowing that we want him to come back, I don't think that's any question. I mean, he's important to this team. He's important to what we do. And more importantly, I think the friendships and the bonds that he's made here, I think, supersede all of that.
HB, you talked about the consistency of the coaching staff and the front office over the last couple of years coming into the season. The consistency of the roster as well, bringing the core back, including yourself, was, I know, a big talking point. Can you provide the player perspective on how you felt that played into kind of the growth of this team, especially on the defensive end, and the positives from the player standpoint of keeping a group like this together and sticking with it and not reacting to a season and making changes or things like that?
Honestly, it's just having a shared experience. I think looking, like I said, not to keep dwelling on the past, but just like going from year to year, like when you're constantly like flipping the roster, like it's tough to know what you're building. And I think from last year to have that group to this year coming in with a different expectation, and frankly falling short and feeling what that feels like, right? I mean, in a span of 48 hours, you go from like a great play-in win to a, disgusting play-in loss, right? So it's all part of a process, right? Having these guys here, going through that. I mean, still understanding that, the growth from a Keegan, a Keon, a Davion. I mean, there's still moments where you look at that and you say, okay, there's things that we can take from this experience, even though it was, a disappointing end to the season, even though obviously it was a painful finish, things like that. To not be able to beat New Orleans this season, there's still some positives that can be taken away, from the group.
This episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by BetterHelp. Sometimes we need the opportunity to get something off of our chest, whether it's big or small. Certain things can really start to get to us, right? It's important to let that out, especially to someone who is unbiased on your life. I've talked a lot about BetterHelp. I've talked a lot about mental health, not just this season, but over the past couple of seasons. It's something very important to me. It's also something that's been taken a lot more seriously in not just NBA circles, but in professional sports in general, right? Because we're all human beings. We all have baggage that we cover. We all have things that we go through. You never, ever know or completely understand what someone might be facing. And here's the thing. Some of us think, my problems aren't big enough for therapy, right? Oh, I need to be going through something severe like a loss in the family or battling depression or have a massive childhood trauma or something in order for it to be worth it for me to talk to a therapist. Truly, trust me, that is not the case at all. I felt that exact same way. Then I started going and seeing a therapist. I've been seeing my therapist, TJ, for over 3 years. He's helped me unpack things that I didn't think were a big deal that turned out to be a big deal, but he's also helped me get through the little things in life that if we're not careful can pile up and turn into something massive that can drag us down and put us in a really tough spot. So if you're considering giving therapy a try to work out those big, medium, or small issues, make sure you check out BetterHelp. Go to BetterHelp.com and make sure you go to BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA. You'll get 10% off of your first month. BetterHelp is entirely online. It is designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Again, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Now, we've all been there, whether as a player or a sports fan. It's halftime, and you look up at the scoreboard, and things aren't looking good, right? You're feeling low, not sure when your team or if your team is going to be able to pull out a win. Then you dig deep, lift your head up, and say to yourself, it's time to get back into the action, pull off some bank heists, take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can, and win. Well, maybe we're talking about something different from the basketball games or football games that you used to play growing up. I'm talking about the smash hit Monopoly Go, available on mobile. It lets you compete with your friends and get the most riches and biggest empire. It's Monopoly that you love, but on your phone anytime, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball. That's a real thing. You can charge other players rent for your iconic properties too, just like the classic game. You can even work with your friends and crack open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and to climb the leaderboard. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go. It's now for free on the App Store and on Google Play. Finally, let's hear from Keegan Murray. Keegan grew exponentially this season as a defender. He had great moments offensively. Compared to how we were talking about him coming into this season, when we heard about him working all offseason with De'Aaron Fox, we were thinking, okay, that was going to have a pretty major benefit on the offensive end, right? If he's working one-on-one with Fox, he's learning how to score on his own without catching and shooting, but shooting off the dribble. That area of his game still needs work. He has plenty of time to put in that work, and I expect that to happen this offseason. But defending De'Aaron Fox is where we saw the biggest benefit from Keegan from last summer, and he became one of the team's best defenders this season. Keegan talks about his growth defensively. He talks about his next steps. He even talks about his fellow Iowa alumni now, Caitlin Clark, as she was just drafted to the Indiana Fever and takes her talents to the WNBA. A lot of good stuff here from Keegan Murray.
Hey, Keegan. What was this year like for you? And, obviously being one of the younger guys on the team, but they're asking you to do a little bit more. So just kind of adjusting to the process of picking your spots and trying to be aggressive out there.
Yeah, I think it was definitely a good experience for me. I feel like a couple of times, especially like later in the year, I feel like I was aggressive almost every game, whether I was hitting my shots or not, and things like that. But we haven't really had that. I haven't really had the opportunity when guys have gone down to be able to step in and kind of fill that role that we lost. So it was a good learning experience.
Kind of, along those lines too, having the team that wins, you experienced a lot of success in that rookie season and obviously success this year as well. How much different did it ultimately feel? And I just wonder, was there a point in the season where you said, man, this might be a more difficult stretch than what we had even anticipated?
Yeah, it was interesting just because I feel like we're kind of on the same timeline as last year, record-wise, win-wise, and obviously the West has been a lot better this year. So it was different, just kind of going through those games, having really important games late in the season, 2 weeks left in the season, things like that. So obviously it was a different stretch and one that you can learn from. Obviously it was disappointing to lose a lot of those important games down the stretch that could have solidified us getting in the playoffs, not having to play playing games.
Keegan, can you speak a little bit to the leadership, the growth of the leadership on this team from your rookie year through this season, and how, whether it's specific players, the team as a whole got better in that area, and how it helped you develop?
Yeah, it's been evident, especially I think obviously we got the vets like JaVale, HB, we had Deli last year, guys like that who have been in that leadership role before, stepped in, have been really good vets for our team. I think like guys like Fox, Domas have really kind of found their voice since I've got here, and I don't know what it was like before, but I can just see their growth, and that's gonna be a big part of our success going into the future.
Keegan, when you look at this offseason, you made a big jump last offseason. I'm guessing you're probably looking to do the same this offseason. Specifically, when you look at your aggressiveness, is that something that you can work on in the offseason, or is that a mental thing where it's going to be like, hey, in the game, if I'm not having a good night, I still have to attack the basket and be relevant in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just a mindset thing. I mean, you come into the NBA and there's really good players around you. And in college, I mean, it was different because I was kind of the guy that was going to shoot a lot of shots. So I always had that mindset to be aggressive no matter what was going on in the game. And I think when I'm at my best, I have that aggression, and I've found success in that throughout this season when I've had that aggression. So it's just maintaining that throughout the whole season. And I know if I do that, I'll have success.
Keegan, this seems to be an extraordinary coaching staff. I know Dutch been working with you and Luke Klaus, with Fox, and Lindsey Harden has been there, and she's getting a lot of attention around the league. But Jordi Fernandez, what was it like working with him the past couple seasons? And if you could, speak on the coaching staff overall.
Yeah, Jordi, I mean, he was my summer league coach my rookie season, so I've kind of had a good bond with him from basically the start of when I got to Sacramento, and he's definitely a coach that I feel like has influenced me a lot, just from him talking to me, coaching me in summer league, and then being able to be with him the last 2 years. He's been a really good coach, and I feel like he'll be a really good head coach. I feel like I've seen him take that role before, and he's been successful at it when we've lost Mike a couple games and things like that. But, I mean, our coaching staff, I feel like, is done really well. Obviously, they're getting a lot of opportunities now elsewhere and coaching vacancies and things like that. But I feel like we've got a good staff here that's allowed us to be successful these last couple of years.
Keegan, what is it you think you need to do this summer to take that next step? And how much of this is you finding your voice to demand the ball sometimes to take that next step, so you're kind of replicating what happened here at the end of the season where they needed you more?
Yeah, I think, honestly, at the end of the year, I feel like I had good moments. I've had moments that have been a little rough, but just being able to not be as one-dimensional, and by that I mean just not being always relying on DHOs, guys passing me the ball, things like that, being able to play in a pick and roll, being able to bring the ball down the court and create something for a teammate and things like that. So it's not always about scoring the ball. It's about being able to play and make, and that's something I want to get better at because when I am scoring the ball, I do draw a lot of attention. So just making guys' lives easier, I think that's a big goal of mine throughout the summer.
Gotcha. The second one is a little off topic, but just your fellow Hawkeye, Caitlin Clark's heading to Indiana, obviously in the WNBA. Just what advice do you have for her going into her first year, and kind of just reflect on what kind of impact she's having on the women's game overall?
Yeah, it's been cool because we both came in as freshmen together, so I've kind of been able to see her grow as a player my 2 years there, and just the effect that it's having on the community. Because in Iowa we don't have a professional team. We have a couple minor league teams. So the University of Iowa and University of Iowa State are kind of the two main things in the state. So to see not only the state gravitate towards the state of Iowa, but also the world, the country gravitate, has been really cool. And she's the center of it. So for her next year, it's really, actually in a couple weeks, it's gonna be highs and lows for her, but I feel like she'll easily be able to figure the game out quickly, like she did at Iowa, and become a generational player.
So make sure you join me on tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast, where I will be fresh out of the Golden One Center. I will be there for the Kings post or end of season press conferences with head coach Mike Brown and general manager Monte McNair. Monty typically doesn't say too much, but there are going to be some questions thrown his way about the decisions that he made this year, and more importantly, the decisions that he has to make this upcoming summer, right? I'm not trying to embellish anything by saying this is a massive, massive, massive offseason for the Kings. Of course, there are going to be questions about Malik Monk, questions about his decision to stay put at the trade deadline and run everything back last year, what needs to be done for him to compete in the Western Conference next year. There's going to be a lot of good questions and hopefully a lot of good answers from Mike and from Monty on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Kings, so I can't wait to have you join me for that. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.